If you asked anyone who knew me at any point in my life, they would say I was always a positive person, the person who sees the bright side of everything, and I believe that too. But then one day, anxiety took over my life. I stopped enjoying things I used to love, my thoughts became overwhelming, and even when everything was fine, anxiety didn't go away. And if this sounds familiar to you, you're not alone. And most importantly, you don't have to live like this forever. In this video, I want to share my personal experience with anxiety and the steps that truly helped me feel better. But just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist. So if you're really struggling, please get a professional help because you don't have to go through this alone. First, let's talk about what anxiety really is so you can recognize it and take action on it. I divided anxiety into two categories, helpful and unhelpful. Helpful anxiety is the kind that shows up in genuinely stressful situations where we can take action on it, like preparing better for an exam or running away from a danger. This type of anxiety is natural and even useful. It pushes us to react, adapt, and stay safe. Unhelpful anxiety, on the other hand, is the kind that sticks around for a long time, affecting your quality of life and taking over your thoughts. It keeps you in a constant state of worry, even when there's no real reason for it. And that's the type of anxiety that I want to talk about today, because it's not something we just have to live with. There are ways we can manage it. Anxiety isn't just about feeling nervous. It affects our body, emotions, thoughts, and even our daily habits. Here are some of the common symptoms and how they actually feel. Pay attention to how many of these sound familiar to you. According to the WHO, we divide anxiety into 4 categories. The first one is physical symptoms, when anxiety affects our bodies. This can be increased heart rate, shortness of breath when it's hard to breathe, dizziness, sweating, trembling or shaking, chest pain, muscle tension, for example, jaw or shoulders are always tight, stomach issues, or you just can feel nauseous. The second category is emotional symptoms. When anxiety messes with your feelings, for example, feeling restless, like you can't sit still and your body feels wired, like you always have to do something, feeling overwhelmed when even small tasks feel huge, irritability, fear for no reason, or anticipating the worst. And the most frustrating part about this is that you know that it doesn't make sense. You tell yourself there's nothing to worry about, but your brain refuses to listen. And the third category is cognitive symptoms, when anxiety takes over your mind. It's like having a little voice in your head that won't shut up, and it keeps feeding you the worst case scenarios and making simple things feel impossible. For example, excessive worrying, when everything is fine but you can't stop overthinking, or difficulty concentrating when you sit down to work or read a book, but your mind keeps drifting to random worries. The next thing can be is mind going blank when you're in the middle of conversation or work and suddenly your mind just shuts down, like somebody pressed the mute button. And the last thing here is overestimating danger, when you had slightly awkward conversation and now you think that someone hates you. And those things are exhausting. It makes simple things like making a decision or just sitting in silence so much harder than they should be. And the last category is behavioral symptoms, when anxiety changes what you do. And the first one here is avoidance of feared situations. When you know you should make that phone call or have that difficult conversation, but one thought about it makes your stomach tighten, and then you keep postponing it or avoiding it completely, even if you know in the long run it makes your life harder. And the next thing is procrastination, when you have something important to do, but you keep scrolling on your phone, or you suddenly feel the need to clean the entire house, and it's not laziness, you just feel paralyzed by the pressure of the task, so you keep postponing it until the very last moment. Also, you can feel here the distress in social situations. When even simple interactions are overwhelming, your mind races, you overanalyze every word, and after the conversation, you keep worrying that you said something weird or wrong. And sometimes just the thought of socializing makes you cancel all of your plans. And the last symptom here is compulsive behaviors. It feels like, for example, you have to check if your door is locked multiple times, or reread a message before sending it multiple times, or follow a certain routine just to feel safe. And if you don't do this, you get this nagging feeling that something bad will happen, even if you logically know it won't. During my anxiety episodes, I often felt my heart racing, my breathing became difficult, and I could burst into tears over the smallest trigger. And at one point, I even started to clenching my jaw in my sleep without realizing it. And I'd wake up with this dull, aching pain because I just couldn't relax it. I also started scrolling endlessly on social media just to distract myself from those anxious thoughts. And by the way, that's how my social media addiction developed, and probably I will talk more about this in the next videos. And also, I was avoiding many things, and this where anxiety becomes a cycle, because the more you're avoiding things, the stronger your anxiety gets. If you can relate to this, just know that anxiety isn't something you just grow out of. With the time, it might get even worse. But the good news is that you can learn to manage it. And the next part of this video will be the practical tools to manage your anxiety. The first two techniques are really helpful in the moment when you are having a strong anxiety attack, or when you can feel it starting to build up. In the beginning of my anxiety journey, I wrote down all of those steps on a small piece of paper, put it in my bag, just so I always had it with me. And when anxiety hit, I could pull it out, follow the steps, and ground myself right away. And the first technique is, of course, breathing technique, because it's the easiest way to tell our brain and our body that it's safe. When we're anxious, we breathe fast and shallow, which tells our brain that something is wrong. But if you slow your breathing down, your brain gets the message like, hey, we're okay, everything is fine. And here's what to do. Breathe in deeply for 4 seconds. Hold that breath for 4 seconds. And slowly breathe out through your mouth for 6 to 8 seconds. You can try it a few times right now, and you can notice that your body is starting to relax almost immediately. And the next technique is called the 5 senses grounding technique. If anxiety is making you feel disconnected or overwhelmed, this technique brings you back to the present moment by using your 5 senses. Just look around and do this. First, notice 5 things you can see: the sky, a plant, your hands, or the texture of your clothes. Next, notice and touch 4 things you can touch. Again, the fabric of your shirt, or the floor under your feet, the table, or your phone. Then notice 3 things you can hear. For example, the birds outside, the hum of your fridge, or your own breathing. Notice 2 things you can smell, maybe coffee, a candle, or fresh air. And the last thing is taste 1 thing you can taste, even if it's just the inside of your mouth. This works because anxiety often pulls us into the future, worrying about what might happen. Grounding pulls you back to the present, reminding that right now, in this moment, you are safe. These techniques may seem simple, but trust me, they work. Write down on a small list of paper all of those steps, and the next time the anxiety hits, follow them. and you will notice how much calmer you will feel. Now I'm going to talk about some exercises that can help you work through anxiety on a deeper level. These are better to do when you're in a more stable state, not during an actual anxiety or panic attack. These exercises focus on understanding the root of your anxiety and gradually building tools to manage it in a healthier way. So if you're feeling calmer, this is the perfect time to try them out. The first technique is from the book When Panic Attacks, which, by the way, is a very good book on anxiety. I highly recommend it, and it's called Cost-Benefit Analysis. It helps you examine both positive and negative aspects of your anxiety to see whether it's serving you or holding you back. The first step is to write down the specific anxiety or worry that you want to address. For example, let's say you're worrying about the upcoming presentation at work. The second step is to draw the line in the middle of the page to make 2 columns, then label one column benefits and the other drawbacks. The third step is list the benefits of your anxiety. Think about what does this anxiety help you with, even though it feels uncomfortable. For example, it helps me stay alert and focus on preparing for this presentation, or it keeps me motivated to practice and make sure that I'm well prepared, or maybe it pushes me to double check my work to avoid mistakes. And the fourth step now is to list the drawbacks of your anxiety. And this is where you will look at how the anxiety affects your life negatively. For example, it makes me feel exhausted and overwhelmed, which drains my energy, or it prevents me from enjoying the process of preparing, turning it to a stressful task, or it stops me from sleeping well because I keep worrying about the presentation, or it increases my self-doubt, making me questioning my abilities even though I'm well prepared. The fifth step now is to look at both sides and ask yourself, is it anxiety really helping me in the long term, or it mostly creating problems? Often you realize that while anxiety might give you some push, the negatives far outweigh the positives. And finally, think about how you can reduce the anxiety while keeping the positive effects. For example, you might choose to set aside time to prepare calmly, practice some relaxation techniques, or challenge your negative thoughts to reduce your anxiety and still perform well in your presentation. This exercise helped me to look at anxiety from a different angle. It made me realize that even though anxiety feels like it's trying to protect us from something scary, most of the time it's actually getting in my way. The next technique is also from the book When Panic Attacks, and I think it's a great follow-up to the previous one. The what if technique helps you break the cycle of catastrophic thinking by taking your fear to absolute extreme. Often, when you fully play out your worst case scenario, you realize how unrealistic it actually is. How does it work? First step, write down your anxious what if thought. For example, what if I embarrass myself during an important meeting? Then ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? For example, I might forget what to say, stumble over my words, and people will think that I'm not competent. And then just keep going. So what? If people think that I'm not competent, my boss might find out. Okay, so then what? If my boss finds out, he might think that I'm not good at my job and fire me. If I get fired, I won't be able to find a new job because I will not have any recommendations. So what happens next? I'll run out of money, lose my home, and end up living on the streets as a homeless person. Now it's time to stop and to ask yourself, how likely is this really? Wait, is one bad meeting actually gonna lead to me becoming homeless? Probably not. So the next step is to reframe your thought. Instead of, what if I embarrass myself? Try, even if I mess up, it's not the end of the world. People will forget at some point, and I can always recover. By exaggerating your fear to its most ridiculous conclusion, you expose how unrealistic it is and take away its power. The next technique is called the worry time technique, and I first learned about it when I took the anxiety course. and it really, really works. The first thing you need to do is to schedule your worry time. Pick a specific time each day, preferably in the morning, when you will allow yourself to fully experience fear and anxiety. For example, from 10 to 10:30. Then find a private space where no one will disturb you. The room, the bathroom. The next step is to set a timer for 30 minutes. Now, face your fears head on. Say out loud what scares you, the things you've been avoiding, and exaggerate them. Your goal is to spiral into anxiety for the full half hour. Most likely, by the 20th minute, you will run out of fears, but you have to keep going. Whether you stay anxious the whole time or you struggle to find more fears, it doesn't matter. You have to keep going. And do this daily for 1 week. No skipping. Over time, you will notice something interesting. Your fears will start losing their power. Your body won't react as strongly and emotionally, and it won't feel as overwhelming. But if this exercise feels too intense or makes your anxiety worse, write down your fears instead, set a 30-minute timer, and exaggerate them just like you would aloud. Because in our minds, fears can feel endless. We keep looping the same thought over and over again. But once we put them on paper, they eventually run out. We won't keep writing the same thing forever. Sooner or later, we reach the end. And now, when anxious thoughts creep in during the day, remind yourself, I'll deal with this during my worry time. This technique is incredibly helpful because it allows you to focus on your daily tasks without suppressing your emotions. Instead of letting anxiety take over your day, you give it a designated space. You're not ignoring your fears, you're just postponing them to a time when you can process them intentionally. And surprisingly, when the time comes, many worries lose their intensity or even disappear altogether. Remember how I mentioned that anxiety reminds me of a filter through which we see life? Well, that's exactly how it works. Almost everyone has cognitive distortions, different types of mental filters that shape our perception. Now I'll give you a few examples of these distortions. The first is all or nothing thinking, or it's also called black and white thinking. This distortion makes you see things in extreme categories, either perfect or a complete disaster with no middle ground. For example, if I don't get an A for this exam, I'm a total failure. Or if I don't go to the gym every day, there is no point in working out at all. This type of thinking puts enormous pressure on you. If you believe that anything less than perfection is unacceptable, you'll constantly feel stressed and anxious. So, how to reframe it? Recognize that progress, not perfection, is what matters. Instead of, I'm a failure, try, I didn't do as well as I thought, but I can improve next time, and it's still better than nothing. The next distortion is catastrophizing. This is when you imagine the worst possible outcome, even when there's little evidence that it will happen. You exaggerate problems and believe they will lead to disaster. For example, I made a small mistake in my report. My boss will think that I'm incompetent, I'll get fired, and I'll never be able to find another job. Or I feel a little dizzy. What if I faint in public? People will laugh at me, and I'll never be able to go outside again. Remember that your brain treats imagined disasters as real threats, triggering a constant state of worry and stress. So, how to reframe it? Ask yourself, what's the most likely outcome? Instead of jumping from minor mistake to losing your job, acknowledge that your boss might not even notice, or at worst, give you some feedback to improve. The next distortion is mind reading. This is when you assume you know what others are thinking, usually something negative, without any real evidence. For example, she didn't reply to my message. She must be mad at me. Or they looked at me and whispered, they must be making fun of me. Mind reading makes you second guess yourself and makes you feel anxious about social interactions, even when there is no real reason for it. So, how to reframe it? Remind yourself, I don't have the evidence for this thought. Maybe your friend is just busy, or maybe these people were talking about something completely unrelated. And instead of assuming, ask for clarification if needed. I first learned about those cognitive beliefs or distortions at the nonviolent communication training, and I found them particularly interesting in relation to anxiety. Similarly, in the book When Panic Attacks, there is a list of common irrational beliefs that provide a food for thought and highlight common patterns. In the video description, I'll include a link to the full list of cognitive distortions. I encourage you to read through all of them. I suggest writing down the irrational beliefs that you hold and analyzing the pros and cons of each one, just like in the third technique that we discussed. Then, the second step, try to reframe your belief by formulating a new one that keeps the benefits while eliminating the drawbacks. Now that you have a set of powerful techniques to manage anxiety, pick one exercise and do it right now, or set a specific time when you will. Agreed? Anxiety doesn't define you, and no matter how stuck you feel, it is possible to break free from it. These tools made a huge difference for me, and I hope that they will help you too. So, which tool do you want to try out first? Let me know in the comments, and also if you've tried something else that worked, share it with us. Let's help each other. You're not alone in this, and you have more power over your anxiety than you think.